While many big-name free agents have signed to teams, including Shohei Ohtani's record $700 million contract, as of Valentine's Day, there are still a number of players to be signed. So let's look into why some of these players are taking so long, where they may go, and if this is a good or bad thing for baseball.
Totally sports. Ask. Major League.
A new term popping up is the Boras 4, given to perhaps the 4 best players remaining who all belong to agent Scott Boras. Boras is often regarded as the most powerful agent in sports and is without a doubt the most powerful in baseball. Boras has represented a number of top players during his decades in the game, and that continues to this day with the likes of Bryce Harper, Max Scherzer, and guy who loves baseball more than anyone, Anthony Rendon, having Boras represent them. And the 4 he represents now, who are the most sought after and still available, are Jordan Montgomery, who was a huge part of the Rangers winning the World Series, Matt Chapman, a 4-time Gold Glove winner whose 4.4 WAR in 2023 matches another Boras client, and Cody Bellinger, the former MVP who had a great year with the Cubs after struggling for his final 2 years with the Dodgers, and the final one being Blake Snell, who just won his second Cy Young as a member of the Padres. All 4 capable of receiving large contracts totaling the 9-figure range, and a number of teams including the Yankees, Rangers, Cardinals, Blue Jays, and Cubs, among others, are looking to sign or re-sign one of these 4. It may seem strange for a player to sign a 9-figure contract at this point in the offseason, but as recent years have shown, they wouldn't be alone. According to ESPN, over the last 10 off-seasons, there have been 11 contracts given out past January 27th that totaled 5 years or more, with Bryce Harper's and Manny Machado's $300+ million contracts being outliers, while others such as Yu Darvish, Eric Hosmer, JD Martinez, and JT Realmuto signing 9-figure contracts this late into the offseason. Regardless of how good these players are, it's difficult to negotiate this time in the year. Both teams and players, along with those who represent them, have engaged in a staring contest that has lasted for months, and naturally ends up being risky for both sides. Teams can miss out on the necessary players for success, and players can miss out on larger contracts and even hurt themselves in the long run. But if there's been one man who's been able to negotiate on behalf of their players like no one else, it's Scott Boras. The controversial agent was the first to secure a $50 million, $100 million, and $200 million contract for players. And in recent years, he has secured over $1 billion for his clients in free agency. So it's easy to see why players will put such incredible amount of trust in him. But this year is a little bit different. You can consider a part of the reason for the delay being the wait for where Shohei and Yamamoto would go. A delay that Shohei apologized for in his Instagram post where he used a grainy picture of the Dodgers logo on page 28 of Google Images to announce where he was going. But another underlying part lies in concerns for a huge part of team revenue. Bally Sports filed for bankruptcy last March, and considering that Bally owns local TV rights of over half the teams in the league, it's given teams an excuse and a valid concern for the future. Local media makes up for 23% of MLB's total revenue, and with the decline of TV in general, it gives teams and owners cause for concern. Although recent negotiations with Amazon and Bally have to give teams some confidence. And besides concerns for future revenue, another piece that may keep teams from giving Boras and his players what they want is recent outcomes of teams. 2 of the biggest spenders last year who aren't always there were the Mets and the Padres. The 2 teams had a combined payroll over $600 million, and neither made the playoffs. And the Padres reportedly had to take out a loan to deal with a number of issues, including player payroll. The year of 2023 is any indication, maybe teams will be less likely to hand out big long-term contracts to older players. And as a part of the issues Blake Snell and Cody Bellinger are facing. Bellinger had easily his best year since his 2019 MVP season, and is asking for upwards of $200 million that has to be brought down. And Blake Snell won the Cy Young and countered the Yankees' offer for 6 years $150 million to 9 years $270 million. That was naturally declined. Both will have to bring down the price even with the tactics of Boras, as teams are aware of the age and consistency issues that hinder a long-term contract. And one more thing that has caused a delay is the mere fact that only so many teams are willing to go after these guys. Addressing a bigger issue in baseball, the asking price of 9 figures is something only a few teams can afford anyway. The spending gap between teams has to be an issue addressed in the future, or teams like the Dodgers will hold a monopoly over the market every year, even if they end up losing. And a bold prediction I'm going to make is that none of the Boras 4 will sign with the A's or the Rays. So going back to the question of his players waiting for almost last minute to sign good for baseball, well, I mean, not really. There's a large portion of fans who aren't aware where most of these players end up until opening day, but for those who pay attention before, watching owners and players have staring matches until the very end isn't very enjoyable, although it gives you more time to create hypothetical scenarios where any of these players join your team. Although Boras is very good at his job, which is to make players a lot of money and take some of that with him, the owner's not budging is clear indication that Boras may be asking for too much, and as the season gets closer and closer, the price will have to drop or they'll be playing in Russia next year, or even worse, Oakland. And these 4 aren't the only players still unsigned. Jorge Soler just signed with the Giants, but JD Martinez, Tommy Pham, Gio Urshela, and others still haven't found a team. You have to imagine it will be a frenzy over the next couple of weeks, but it clearly would have been better if this took place earlier to keep interest. So as these 4 players and others make their final negotiations, I think it could say a lot about free agencies to come. Outside of Ohtani and Yamamoto, you could argue that this was a weak class, which doesn't help the negotiation process. But if TV revenue declines and owners are more willing to stand their ground with Boras, massive long-term contracts could become something reserved for only the top players. Or maybe things will continue, and Scott Boras will keep making players huge money, TV deals will go up, and aging players will get to spend the rest of their career relaxing in Los Angeles with a pool of money in the bank.